Tonight is the second of the Foundation Stone series of Robert's work, and he's going to lead us into the depths of human thoughts and emotion, and look into how mind works. And this is personally the topic that most closely related to my own work, so I really look forward to it. And with that, I invite you to give a warm round of applause for Dr. Robert.
Thank you, Spring. Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. This all fits into the Foundation Stones project. And so I want to be able to just give you a little bit of context as to what tonight is a part of. You've been hearing that we started off with What Time Is It in February. Tonight is the first of two presentations around tools for the journey. And the reason I chose that term of tools for the journey is because this whole circle around here is a kind of journey, and we're also in the process of journeying into a new cultural era. And so tonight and in another week, I'm going to focus on two things that feel really important for me in terms of tools for that shift. And in terms of that shift, here's just a little bit from the What Time Is It? At the heart of the notion of what time is it is that we're in the midst of this big cultural transition from what I call the Empire era into the planetary era. That's a shift as deep as the shift out of hunting and gathering and into agriculture and cities. We're being invited to reinvent what we know of as society at a very deep level. And so a lot of the Foundation Stone stuff deals with what is some of that depth. I also like to say that it's in going from one of those eras to the next era, it isn't just as though the previous era totally disappears. Each era transcends and then transforms and incorporates what went before it. So, for instance, in terms of social organization, in the tribal era, social organization was based on kinship. In the Empire era, social organization was based on violence-enforced, religiously sanctioned hierarchy. What we're moving into is a time when the key characteristic of social organization is going to be based around consensual collaboration. So all of this involves a lot that has to do with culture. And a little over, I guess it was about 2 years ago, I put together a little video called Culture as Interface that has this at its heart, with the idea that culture is both material and immaterial, and it serves as this interface between us as humans and the wider world. We have our innate human nature that we share with each other. We each have unique experiences, but they don't really flow into culture per se. And so we wind up with this combination of innate human nature, culture, and the world that then goes like that, with culture as the interface. But if we're going to understand this, it's really helpful to have two core literacies. The first of these literacies is something I call human operating system literacy, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And the other is systems literacy, and that's what we'll get into next week. Human operating system literacy, which is essentially a psychological literacy, helps us to understand what's going on in us individually and in what I'd call the human side of culture. And systems literacy actually helps with those things too, but also really helps with the more systemic parts of culture and very much helps with understanding the natural world. When you've got both of them, the world opens up to you in a whole new way. So that's what we're going to be getting into. So, human operating system. What does that mean? Why am I choosing that term? I want to begin with a certain cell phone analogy to help to explain what the notion of human operating system is all about. So I'm going to start with a feature phone. You remember these? Well, one of the things about feature phones is that from a user point of view, you had a piece of hardware and then you had a bunch of built-in apps that you could, maybe there was a calendar app and a contacts app, an address book app, and you could enter your particular personal stuff into those built-in apps, but you couldn't add any apps to your feature phone. They were fixed. You could change the details, but you couldn't change the apps. So that's from the user point of view. But somebody had to create those apps. And the developers who created those apps interacted with something that's called the operating system. Hidden away from the users, but available to the developers. And the operating system is a layer that translates from the very detailed stuff that the hardware does to commands that are useful in an application, like save or open or copy or paste or any of those things. Those are usually down there in the operating system so that all the various different apps that are on that particular phone can use those really basic functions. Okay, so then along came the smartphone. And with smartphones, you still have built-in apps. But you have the ability to add apps. And at first this might have seemed like, yeah, right, fine, big deal. Except that these days, you've got about 30 built-in apps and over 1 million available downloadable user apps. So it wound up being a huge change in terms of potential, in terms of customization, in terms of all kinds of things of that sort. So now let's take this analogy and apply it to living things. For many animals, and I don't want to get into this question about just how smart are gorillas, so I'm just saying for many animals, you have instinctive behaviors that may vary some, but not a lot. And presumably down underneath those instinctive behaviors are some kind of operating system, some pattern that's in their brains, in the body, however it is that it works. But we don't particularly see it in the animals. However, for us as humans, we can learn really new behaviors that just weren't visible before. So for us, and here, let me back up and say that these learned behaviors are culture. That's where culture lands in people. And so if you're going to change culture, you're going to wind up changing learned behaviors. And if you're interested in participating in the process of changing culture, then it helps you become like an app developer. Only now you're developing cultural apps instead of technology apps. But if you're going to do that, then it really helps if you have a deeper understanding for what is, as humans, what is our operating system? What are the things that are down there at a very base level that apply across cultures, and not only across existing cultures, but also will apply probably to the culture that we're growing into. So in order to get into this, I want to do an exercise. We're going to discover both some of what is going on in our operating system and then get a cultural app. So this is about working memory. Working memory is a psychological term for, it's sort of related to short-term memory. I'll get into it a little bit more. But what we're going to do in this experience is I'm going to speak some numbers. And it's important that we do this all just with hearing and in your head. You add them up. You add the numbers up in your head. And then you're going to raise your hand to report how hard it was for you. Now, I want to emphasize this is not about the arithmetic. This is a chance for you to experience some of the limits that are with you all the time, but we generally don't notice. Okay, you ready? So, 3 and 4. So add them in your heads. Okay. 14 and 25. Great. 84, 37, and 25. It's okay, you take your time. 372, 893, 266. So I'll go one more now. 591, 227, 365, 791. So, Eldon, I'm glad that you were able to keep working it, but I think I'm going to stop at that point. It turns out that when they do the studies really carefully, there are essentially 4 chunks, plus or minus 1, that you're able to hold in a short-term way if they're not part of some set of associations. If it's part of a story, you can actually hold quite a bit. But these numbers were just kind of random. So you only got 4 chunks to work with. We have a lot of workarounds for that. But if you wonder why in meetings you'll sit there and the meeting will seem to go round and round and round, it's because people are struggling with their 4 chunks. And the new topic comes along and pushes the old chunk out, and anyway, there are issues. However, suppose that you invented written numerals and you could write these things down on paper and you weren't trying to do it in your head. Then there's a wonderful way that you can make use of that so that it's actually pretty easy. So we take the first 2, 5 and 4. In our heads, we're well within our 4 chunks. And it's easy numbers. And we get the 9, and then the 9 is there. And we can forget about the other parts. And we get the 6. And then in your head, you've got the 9 and the 6, and you get a 15. So you got the 15. And you see where this is going. It's a simple algorithm that is a cultural app. 10,000 years ago, nobody did this. It's not part of the instinctive supply that humans come with. And it's a place where when we did it simply by voice, we were depending on the linguistic parts of our brain, which is where the 4-chunk limit comes. When we do this, we start using the visual parts of our brain as well. And the visual parts of our brain enable us to externalize an awful lot of working memory. So that's at the deep operating system level, to think about what can you do with your linguistic stuff, what can you do with your visual stuff, and as we'll see, what can you do with your kinesthetic stuff.